During this lecture, we'll be talking about the genetic structure changes that can occur in a population. And let's first talk about mutations. In mutations, what happens here is there is a change of an allele to another, and this is going to be obviously creating a new allele. Now, usually this is due to the error-prone activity of the DNA polymerase. However, let's try to explain this. This is assuming there are no exogenous factors that are actually pertaining a role in this mutation process particularly, because if there were exogenous factors, then these levels of mutations are going to be extremely high. Therefore, this is going to be deviating us from our main goal. Next, we've got to mention that the change of the alleles that can occur can either be positive, negative, or even neutral. By positive, I mean that maybe this change can actually allow the population or the species to now live in a colder climate. Negative, it means that a crucial allele has been mutated, and this is going to be detrimental, maybe even causing the death of the organisms. And maybe they can be neutral. That means the mutation actually did not play a major role, or did not make a difference in the lifestyle of these organisms. Next, we've got migration. Now, worth more noting that these migrations can either be in or out of the population. If in, that means new alleles are going to be introduced to the population, which is going to be enriching the gene pool. Now, while this might be good, this also might be bad, because maybe bad genes are going to be introduced into the population, and this is going to be also detrimental for the population. So this is also worth noting. Next, we've got if out of the population, this is going to be doing the opposite by decreasing the gene pool. Also, this can be positive or negative, but for the most part, it is going to be negative, because we are going to be losing a chunk of our gene pool. Next, we've got just like we mentioned before, if a certain chunk of the population migrates out. Now, I'd actually like to dive into this a little bit more. Let's assume we've got a certain population, and this actually dives into migrates into two different parts. Like half of them went to a location X, and half of them went to location Y. What happens here is that each population is going to be accumulating certain mutations that are different from the other. Eventually, these mutations are going to be accumulating to a point where these different populations cannot breed anymore. Therefore, they are not a part of the same species. Therefore, this is going to be forming a new species, or simply this is going to be dying out due to the incapability. But for the most part, it's going to be forming new species, and these are going to be increasing the biodiversity. Next, we've got natural selection. Organisms that are better adapted. This is the traditional explanation for natural selection. Organisms that are better adapted to certain conditions are going to be surviving, and their genotypes are going to be transmitted. These are going to be reproduced in the next generation, and therefore produce more offsprings. Obviously, better genotypes equals more offsprings, and it is as follows: the increased survival rate is going to be increasing the reproduction, therefore increasing the fitness. Essentially, here we mean by fitness, it is the adaptive capacity. Now, let's take an example of antibacterial soap versus a population of bacteria. Let's apply a level of, or a certain dose of antibacterial soap onto a population of bacteria. Let's assume we have 100, 98 are going to be dying, or 99 are going to be, 98 is going to be dying, and 2 are going to be surviving. These are going to be replicating, and now we have a 100 bacteria present on the plate that we are trying to clean. Then we apply the same antibacterial soap at the same dose for the survivors. Now, instead of 2 that are going to be surviving, we've got 10 that are surviving, because essentially the good genes that have been increased. What we mean by good genes here is the fact that the first 2 that survived actually had a higher adaptive capacity in order to survive the antibacterial soap that is present. So therefore, now these 10 actually have this adaptive capacity. Therefore, 90 are going to be dying and 10 are going to be surviving. And then this can be repeated until all the population of the bacteria that is present there is going to be not affected by the antibacterial soap. So this is what we mean by natural selection. Genetic drift, a change refers to the change in genetic frequencies by chance alone. This is also due to the errors in the DNA replication. Non-random mating. Here, mating combines, obviously, when we're talking about reproduction, it is going to be combining the alleles into genotypes. In the case of the non-random mating, we are going to be forcing certain genotypes to combine in order to reproduce, and this is going to be altering the old allele frequency. However, if this was random mating, there is going to be a constant allele frequency. Worth noting here that the only change that is going to be present here is the frequency of the genotypes.